Vai.
Ok, pessoal, esse é o Chuck Owen. O Chuck, ele é professor da University of South Florida. Na verdade, ele é o criador do programa de jazz da University of South Florida. Ele é um compositor extremamente bem reconhecido nos Estados Unidos, premiado. O último álbum dele, ele recebeu 4 indicações ao Grammy. Se eu não me engano, ele tem mais 3 indicações anteriores. Ele é o presidente da Sociedade Internacional de Compositores e Arranjadores de Jazz, que é uma associação internacional da qual fazem parte como sócios todos os principais compositores e arranjadores de jazz para big band e alguns para banda pequena. Creio que o Chico Ria é um sócio dessa sociedade, inclusive. Então, eu poderia ficar essa 1 hora inteira falando sobre as qualificações do Chuck, mas aí a gente não iria conseguir conversar com ele. Chuck, before we start, I just have something I would really like to tell you. There was a moment at USF that was really special for me, and you were there. When I had my recital, you probably remember how chaotic was that day. Like we didn't know if we were going to have a recital or not. It was the craziest day in this year, I believe. But we ended up meeting, and when I finished my recital, you came to me and it looked like you were going to say something like, give me a good feedback about the recital, but you just stopped in in front of me, and you couldn't say anything, and you just gave me a hug. So I felt so happy about that.
Oh, good. That's what you deserved.
Thank you so much. It's a good memory I will always carry with me. So let's go. The first question I have for you is, as a way we can know more about your work and about the skills you have earned for your life, would you be able to kind of make a list of 5 high achievements you have reached as a composer, arranger, and music educator?
I guess, I mean, the obvious ones are the Grammy nominations for my albums, and just the recognition for my own albums. That would be one.
Eu acho que os mais óbvios são as nomeações, indicações ao Grammy pelos meus álbuns. Esse seria um.
I got a Guggenheim Fellowship. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's a very, very prestigious grant which allowed me to write that big concerto for jazz orchestra that featured guitar and saxophone.
Eu consegui uma Guggenheim Fellowship, que não sei se vocês sabem o que é, mas ela me permitiu escrever um concerto de jazz para guitarra e saxofone alto.
I've had the opportunity recently to work with the WDR Big Band. We're working on an album right now, and that's it's a wonderful experience and kind of a dream come true.
Tive a oportunidade de trabalhar com a WDR Big Band. Nós estamos escrevendo um álbum nesse momento e foi uma oportunidade excelente.
This is going back a long time ago, but I got a chance to write for the Tonight Show Big Band, and when it was in Los Angeles, and that was kind of the start of my career, and so that was a huge moment for me.
Isso faz muito tempo, mas eu tive a chance de escrever arranjos para o Tonight Show quando eu estava em Los Angeles. Isso faz muito tempo, mas foi um grande momento para mim. The Tonight Show, you mean, is the David Letterman show?
No, this was back when it was Johnny Carson. The Johnny Carson. People probably
way before David Letterman, that's it? Esse Tonight Show é o show do David Letterman, mas a época que ele escreveu ainda não era o David Letterman apresentando. Acho que muitos de vocês devem conhecer.
And I guess the last one, number 5, although they're all great, but was getting a chance to write for the Netherlands Metropole Orchestra as well. I did several projects with them, and that's such a wonderful group.
E eu acho que o último que eu listaria é ter a chance de escrever para a Orquestra Metropolitana da Holanda ou dos Países Baixos. E é um grupo espetacular. Ok, thank you.
Sure.
Would you be able to tell us briefly about where and how have you had your studies to become a composer and jazz arranger?
I started studying at the University of North Texas as an undergrad, and then continued formal studies out at Cal State University in Los Angeles.
Eu comecei os meus estudos na University of North Texas, como no nível de bacharelado, e depois terminei meus estudos na Cal Arts em Los Angeles. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it wasn't Cal Arts, it was Cal State University Northridge.
Can you type it?
I don't know, see the thing where's the chat? I don't see where the typing thing is here.
You can spell. It works too.
What's that?
You can also spell.
Oh, it's just California University or State University at Northridge, Northridge.
Okay.
But should I continue?
Yes.
But actually, I think like most writers, maybe the experience that I gained was just simply writing for musicians. So in Los Angeles, I formed my own big band along with Gordon Goodwin, and we had a big band for a while, some terrific players and freelance players in LA.
Mas eu acho que, como a maioria dos escritores, a maioria do meu desenvolvimento aconteceu enquanto eu estava escrevendo arranjos para outras pessoas. Tive uma oportunidade de escrever em Los Angeles com um grande músico. His name is Gordon Goodwin. That's it?
Gordon Goodwin.
Oh, Gordon Goodwin. Yes. Sure.
Yeah. I figured some people might know him.
Yes, I know him, actually.
Yeah. But then, obviously, when I came to Tampa, I got a chance to eventually form my own big band, and that may have been the best learning experience, is having my own big band to write for, to meet regularly, and that I could really shape my compositions the way I wanted to.
Mas aí, quando eu me mudei para Tampa, eu tive a oportunidade de criar a minha própria big band, e esse foi o melhor momento em que eu pude a oportunidade de dar forma do jeito que eu queria e fazer da forma como eu queria. Yeah, you mean the Jazz Search.
Right, yeah. I'll mention one other thing as far as educational. Right after I finished my master's degree, I got a grant to study with Patrick Williams. He's a film composer out in LA. They were earlier films, but he was wonderful. I followed him around and learned so much about the film scoring business through Pat at that time.
Assim que eu terminei o meu mestrado, eu tive uma oportunidade também de estudar com o Patrick Williams. Ele é um compositor de trilhas sonoras em Los Angeles e pude aprender bastante com ele também. Okay. Have you actually studied with him or worked with him?
With Patrick?
Yes.
Yeah. I was his kind of. He was kind of my mentor for a year. So I would study a little bit with him, but then he also gave me assignments. So I did a little what the kind of ghost cues for a few of his TV shows and that sort of thing.
E eu iria estudar com ele funcionaria como mentor para mim, mas na verdade ele também me dava tarefas ou trabalhos para fazer como pequenos trechos de trilhas sonoras que apareceriam na TV. Okay. I have another question for you. Your last album Whispers on the Wind is very mature. It sounds very nice. It's innovative, creative, and it definitely shows that your sound has a self-identity, that you have your self-identity as a musician. However, this album also shows that I lost part of my question, but what I think I was going to ask you is that this album also shows that after several decades of your career, your sound kind of changes a little after the decades, and it's kind of easier when you have a recording in the end of your career than in the beginning. So my question is how was the process of composing, recording, and releasing not your last album but your first album? How have you prepared for your first album, and how have you felt on that time?
It's funny, Adolfo. This is the second time today I've been asked this question, which is really weird. So the first album was a first album. I had been waiting for 20 years or so to make this album, but I had just barely formed Surge. We'd just become established just a few months beforehand. So basically the pieces on that some of them were 10 years old. They were coming from everywhere. Some old pieces, a few were pieces I wrote new, but I was just getting to know the band. I'll stop there and let you translate.
O primeiro álbum, eu tinha acabado de formar o Jazz Surge, a big band dele em Tampa. Então, as músicas, elas vieram de toda parte. Tinha músicas que eu tinha feito há 10 anos atrás, tinha as músicas que eu tinha acabado de fazer. Porque o Jazz Surge estava formado há apenas alguns meses.
So, it's, in my mind, and looking back on it, it's a very uneven album. There are some, it's not that I dislike the things, but there's some things that they don't feel very much like me. They were pieces that were commissioned by other people, and I wrote for those bands, and I included because they were pieces that people liked. But in the process of making that band, the few pieces for that band and getting to know the musicians, all of a sudden it was a huge change for me. It was a recognition that I needed to develop something that was more mine, and I actually had the opportunity to do it.
Eu, sinceramente, acho que o primeiro álbum, ele é meio irregular, porque ele tem algumas peças que parecem que não se encaixam ali. Tem algumas peças, por exemplo, que eu fiz por comissionamento, ou seja, ele recebeu dinheiro para fazer alguma peça e ele colocou ali porque ele achava que a peça era interessante. Então, a resposta dele basicamente é que ele foi pegando o que ele tinha e colocou ali, mas que tem algumas coisas que hoje ele escuta e parece que não são como se fosse ele. That's the answer?
I think that's, yeah, is there a follow-up? I mean, you want me to go further with it?
Yes. How have you done for kind of being prepared to press the album and sell the units of the album? Como você se preparou para prensar o álbum e distribuí-lo?
So how did I kind of physically?
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, well, it was a lot different in those days. So that one, I'm trying to think. That one was with a label that no longer exists. It was a label called Seabreeze Records, and their kind of specialty was big band albums, and in particular, a lot of big band albums that had educators involved. And so it seemed like kind of a good home. So they were very enthusiastic about it. And so they took care of all the pressing and they took care of licensing all of the arrangements and all of that sort of thing. I didn't have to do that.
That's very good. Ele disse que no caso do primeiro álbum dele, houve uma gravadora que não existe mais, chamada Sea Breeze, e essa gravadora, eles tomaram conta de tudo. Eles tomaram conta da prensagem, da venda, da distribuição do álbum e da parte de licenciamento das músicas. Então, que ele não teve que se preocupar com nada. That's very good. Let's move on. I have a very good question for you. For you, what is the relevance of the elements? One, self-identity, and two, innovation for a composer.
I think that the self-identity, I mean, in some ways they're kind of both the same a little bit, but having something that separates your music from others is really important in this, and really at any point in time, but especially in this day and age. There is more product. There are more people putting out music now than ever before, even in jazz. I don't want to go too far for the translation purposes, but I've got a little story that I'll tell if you want.
Yes. Let me translate first. Ele disse que ele vê a identidade própria e a inovação possivelmente ambos com uma mesma coisa. Ele disse também que nos tempos modernos, na época de hoje, que você nunca teve tantas pessoas lançando música nova quanto agora, até mesmo no jazz. Please go on.
So I went into one of our local WUSF FM, into Bob Seymour's office one time. And this was 10 years ago, but he had CDs stacked up at least as high as I was, all around his office, the entire office. And I looked at him, I said, "Oh my gosh, Bob, you need to kind of go through some of these CDs and get rid of some. Did you get all these this year?" And he said, "I got all of these this week." And I looked at it, I said, "You've got to be kidding me. How do you listen to it all?" He said, "I don't listen to it all." He said, "I couldn't possibly listen to it all." And that's my point, is there are so many people doing music that the reason people are going to be interested in your music is that you have something new, you have something different, you have some way of communicating with folks that is kind of comes from the heart. People can tell, and so that's why the kind of your own identity is so important. Rather than, I don't need to be another Maria Schneider or another Gordon Goodwin, or another.
I wouldn't complain at all if I could compose like Maria Schneider. This wouldn't be a problem.
But Maria exists, and you don't want to write like that. You need to do something that's different.
Ok. Ele disse que numa rádio local de jazz que tem em Tampa, ele estava lá na WUSF com o Bob Seymour, que era o presidente da rádio, e ele entrou no escritório dele, tinha uma pilha de CDs que era no mínimo da altura dele, mas essa pilha de CD, ela se espalhava pelo escritório inteiro, tudo na altura dele. E ele disse que falou assim: "Oh, meu Deus, você recebeu todos esses CDs esse ano, é melhor você começar a escutar eles." E o Bob Seymour, presidente da rádio, disse: "Não, eu não recebi esses CDs todos esse ano, eu recebi esses CDs nesta semana." Isso, uma rádio de jazz. E ele falou assim, não existe nenhuma possibilidade de eu conseguir escutar isso. Não tem como. Então, por isso o Chuck disse, por isso que eu vejo que é importante que você tenha um trabalho inovador e com uma identidade própria, porque tem tanta gente fazendo música que se você não estiver fazendo algo novo, se você for uma cópia de alguma coisa que alguém já fez, como o Maria Schneider ou Gordon Goldwyn, as pessoas não vão prestar atenção no que você está fazendo.
I can also talk if you want. I mean, developing a personal sound or a kind of is not something also that you necessarily kind of think about. I mean, that's the problem with it. It's a very difficult thing. Is if you sit there and you strategize too much, it feels false. It's really got to come out of kind of who you are. But for me, at some juncture, I was thinking I was working on my second Surge album. I started thinking about things that I liked that weren't big band music that I liked that it wasn't, and I particularly at the time I was really into Bill Frisell's music, and I said, boy, I love that music. It just really speaks to me, and there were a few other albums along those lines, and I thought, well, why don't I try and see what this would sound like if I, transformed it into some sort of big bandy sort of thing. So I didn't take any of Bill's pieces, but what I did take are some of his kind of voicings and that sort of thing. I started playing with those, and I recognized that I loved this sound. This felt like me more, and out of that, I recognized that this whole notion of American folk music was a starting point for me. But it wasn't false. It wasn't saying, I need to do this. It came, from what I love.
Good.
Sorry, that's too long.
A little. I will try to remember everything.
Okay.
Ele disse que tem mais um ponto que ele quer falar, que, assim, às vezes você ter uma identidade própria e ser inovador não pode ser uma coisa intelectual, uma coisa difícil, uma coisa que você fica forçando a acontecer, que não dá para ser. Porque uma vez que você tenta criar estratégias para criar um novo som, ele acaba soando falso, não soa natural. Então, que você simplesmente tem que ser você mesmo. Ele disse que uma vez ele resolveu começar ele estava escutando músicas para formações menores, né? Ele é um compositor de big band, ele estava escutando músicas para formações menores, e ele estava escutando a música do Bill Frisell, e ele falou assim, poxa, eu quero tentar pegar esse tipo de som aqui e transportar ele para big band. E ele começou a ver, especialmente com os voicings do Bill Frisell, eles já são muito parecidos com a identidade dele, com a ideia dele de música, com as influências dele, meio que baseadas no folk music americano. E em cima disso ele acabou vendo que na verdade aquilo é muito próximo do som dele, foi natural fazê-lo. Por isso acabou não sendo falso. Ok. Let's move to another one. I have to select the best questions I have here. I have like 2,000 questions.
Oh no.
It's not that much. I have a very good one here. You will love that one. How to get some recognition and some popularity as someone who works with instrumental music, and not only instrumental music, but autoral or compositional instrumental music with your own music, original music.
How do you? The question is, how do you get more people to listen, or what's? I'm not sure I understand.
Yes, how do you get some kind of, how do you become a well-recognized person in the music business, or for listeners, or get some kind of popularity as a composer or as a musician while you are working with instrumental music and original music?
Well, let's be clear. I'm not very, popular or recognizable in terms of the general population. I am whatever recognition I have comes largely from those people who already like instrumental music and who like jazz, and they recognize me within that very small sphere. So I think it's limited what the form of recognition that I have. However, I'm so delighted, and that the people within that, those are the people whose respect I kind of want most. Those are the people that are going to really love listening to my music. So I'm very excited to have them like it. I'll come back. I'll let you translate that, and then I'll come back and elaborate.
Ele disse que, em primeiro lugar, ele quer dizer que ele, na verdade, ele não é uma pessoa reconhecida pela população em geral. Ele disse que, dentro do segmento específico de pessoas que escutam jazz e música instrumental, ele tem algum reconhecimento. Para as pessoas que já escutam aquele tipo específico de música, existem pessoas que gostam da música dele, mas é porque aquelas pessoas, elas gostam e procuram aquele tipo de som.
Now, I do think one of the things that people neglect to do, that musicians neglect to do, that composers neglect to do most frequently, is really be informed about how to help market their music so that the people that they do want to hear it, their audience, or their prospective audience, is aware of it. And that goes back to that whole thing I told you about Bob Seymour with all that music out there. How do you make sure that people know about this? And what I've found is that there are public relations people who do this for a living. There's all sorts of ways of publicizing your music and putting it out there. But ultimately, if you really want to reach the biggest audience, you need to take advantage of the fact that these people are out there that do this, and this is all they do. They know so much more than what I could be able to put out on social media or in my own efforts. And so it costs a little bit of extra money, but that's something I build into my project budget, my recording budget right from the start. And I really advise everybody to do that. Okay.
I guess that was the kind of the degree I should have pursued, not jazz playing. Eu vou traduzir o que ele disse. Ele disse que ele acha que as pessoas negligenciam muito o fato de que você precisa estar apto a vender e promover a sua música. E que hoje existem pessoas, como relações públicas, por exemplo, que elas são especializadas, elas vivem de fazer isso, que elas fazem isso melhor do que ninguém. E que essas pessoas, elas têm capacidade para fazer isso melhor do que nós mesmos colocando nossa música, por exemplo, nas mídias sociais. Chuck, I have to say that you probably have noticed that, but I have seen that there's a current way of promoting music that is more based into the composer himself promoting his music through the internet. I have seen a lot of articles encouraging people to promote their music by themselves. Yep. And I have always thought about that because, if I have to compose my music and I have to spend like 10 hours a day promoting my music in the internet and learning how to do digital marketing and building strategies to promote my own music, there will be a point that I won't be able to focus in composing anymore. And what do you say about that? A minha pergunta foi, eu vejo que existe uma corrente no momento de pessoas sendo muito incentivadas a se prepararem para promover a sua própria música, ao invés de delegar essa função para outros, e passam horas e horas por dia tentando promover a própria música, e que, na minha opinião, eu acho que isso atrapalha um pouco o processo composicional da pessoa. Qual que é a opinião dele?
Yeah, so that's very true, and that's part of the reason that you allow professionals to do this, is to preserve your own time. There are all sorts of people that have ways that will suggest how you can promote your music online, digitally, and through social media. And the thing is, I do those too, or I do a lot of them myself. But you can never replace the professionals out there have personal relationships with others that write reviews, that head up at big arts agencies and that sort of thing. Having them promote your work does not get you anything necessarily. All it does is it gets you in front of these people. When the guy that does my PR suggests that someone over here looks at my my new album, they're going to look at it. They may not like it. They may not want to write a review. They might, and there's no guarantees, but they will look at it. However, I can do the same thing through social media. Is that person gonna, because I send out social media stuff, or even if I get a direct email to them and send them a copy of the album, are they gonna look at it? Probably not, because they don't know me. They know this PR guy.
Okay, so here we are with our pile of CDs again in the office of Bob Seymour. Ok. Ele disse que a vantagem de você ter essas pessoas, de você ter as relações públicas, é que quando os trabalhos forem enviados para as revistas, por exemplo, para receber uma resenha pelo Relações Públicas, essas pessoas que escrevem sobre música, elas vão olhar o trabalho. Não existe uma garantia, elas podem não gostar, mas elas vão olhar o trabalho porque foi aquela pessoa que mandou. Essas pessoas, elas têm uma rede de contatos. E que ele até pode fazer isso pelas mídias sociais, mas e aí, será que as pessoas vão olhar ou não? Então ele está falando muito sobre o networking, a influência, e ele associa a imagem de você ter, a ideia de você ter relações públicas como você ter uma pessoa que não apenas vai fazer aquele trabalho, mas vai fazer aquele trabalho e por causa da rede de contatos dela, aquele trabalho vai funcionar. Pessoal, eu gostaria de pedir que, se possível, vocês tentem deixar suas câmeras ligadas. É mais interessante para a gente. Turn your cameras on. I have a very good question for you again. I guess I have a lot of very good questions, but let's go. It may be because I am a journalist. Could you please speak a little about the International Society of Jazz Arrangers and Composers? Would it be some way good for musicians that live in Brazil? What it does for people, and why should people look for that?
So, ISJAC, or the International Society for Jazz Arrangers and Composers, is a pretty young organization that is put together specifically to serve other jazz arrangers and composers. That's our goal, is to try and figure out what other jazz arrangers and composers need and help do that. And then at the same time, bring attention to the value of the jazz arranger and composer to the general public, to other musicians and other music organizations. I'll stop there and then I'll continue after you translate.
Ele disse que a Sociedade Internacional de Compositores e Arranjadores de Jazz é uma sociedade razoavelmente nova e que ela visa dar um certo apoio ou fazer conexões para as pessoas que estão cadastradas nela. Eu perdi um pedacinho do áudio aqui. Chuck, I lost a little of the audio while you were speaking. Would you be able to repeat that answer?
Say, what did you lose?
I lost part of your answer.
Oh, I'm not sure which part you. Just basically that we were formed to basically serve the jazz arranger and composer, and all of our initiatives are designed to do that.
Todas as nossas iniciativas são desenvolvidas para servir ao arranjador e compositor de jazz.
So there's a variety of different ways we've tried to do that. One of the things is to just get a really good conversation bring the jazz composers from all over the world together in one spot, which is our Jazz Composers Symposium, every 2 years, to allow them to inspire each other, to help each other, and to kind of listen to some great music at the same time.
Uma das nossas iniciativas, por exemplo, é juntar essas pessoas do mundo inteiro, os compositores e arranjadores de jazz do mundo inteiro, em um lugar só. E nós fazemos isso através do nosso simpósio, que acontecem a cada 2 anos. E através desse simpósio, as pessoas têm a oportunidade de se conhecer, interagir e inspirar umas às outras.
But we also know that a lot of people can't afford to come to these symposia. And so we're more and more, what we're doing is we're doing outreach digitally. We have a blog that's available that talks about different people's, the way they work. We have composer resources that tell a little bit about where you can get funding for different things or support. We're very shortly going to have a thing where our members can submit little videos and share videos of them talking about their own writing, their own music. That'll be coming out just this fall. And we've got grants for young composers that we provide them. When COVID-19 came out, we offered grants to support musicians who had been hurt financially. So basically the idea is we want to support composers, but the first thing is to get all the composers together.
Ele disse que existem pessoas que não têm condições de pagar a viagem para ir até o simpósio, então por causa disso existem outras iniciativas. Eles têm um blog, eles têm um espaço onde as pessoas conseguem colocar as músicas para os outros escutarem, mas que, na verdade, tudo isso significa que, no final, o que a sociedade faz é colocar as pessoas juntas. Ele falou também que existem os grants, que são prêmios ou ajudas financeiras que são concedidas a compositores, e que uma recente que foi feita foi uma ajuda financeira baseada no Covid-19, que eles deram um auxílio financeiro para certos compositores por conta do Covid-19. Eu me lembro quando isso saiu. Ok, Chuck.
So I'll mention that. So the website is www.isjac.org, and currently membership is free. So join.
Eu estou colocando aqui o site para vocês, e se tornar um membro é gratuito. Okay, let's move to another topic. I love that question. Could you please, I have done this question to Jack first. I have asked Jack first.
Okay.
Could you explain how are your composition and arrangement classes, both for the bachelor's level, I mean the composition and arrangement class, and for the master's level, so you can speak about the applied lessons and the seminar in jazz composition? I have asked Jack about his popular jazz styles class, which I still have nightmares about that sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. So you just want me to talk about the classes that I offer?
Yes, I would like you to explain how they work for people who are in Brazil, because we don't have the jazz studies degree in Brazil.
Okay, yeah, so predominantly I teach two types of composition classes now. Although I also do I do an introduction class for undergraduates, for jazz arrangers and composers. All of our jazz studies majors have to take that, because we feel at the University of South Florida that it's really important for all jazz musicians to know, at least have a basic background in how to write and score for groups that they might be working with. I'll stop there and let you.
Então, assim, basicamente tem dois tipos de disciplinas que eu ensino aqui na University of South Florida, baseadas em composição e arranjo. Uma dessas classes é uma classe que eu ensino, uma disciplina que eu ensino para o nível de bacharelado, que é uma introdução à composição e arranjo, porque aqui na University of South Florida nós acreditamos que é importante para qualquer músico ter uma noção pelo menos básica de como compor e arranjar para a vida profissional deles.
In that undergraduate class, as you well know, we have to learn to write for a rhythm section, for saxophone sections, for groups with 2 horns and 3 horns, and ultimately have to write for a big band.
Nessa disciplina nós temos que escrever para a seção rítmica, nós temos que escrever para 2 sopros, 3 sopros, 4 sopros, e mais recentemente, nós temos que escrever para Big Band também. So this online course I have been teaching for 12 weeks. It actually covers part of the knowledge regarding writing for 2 horns, 3 horns, and 4 horns. That's what we have been doing for the intermediate level. We haven't tried any big band reading, and this is not going to happen, but it was excellent because I personally believe that the best way someone can understand the arrangement of music, it's not only analyzing the arrangement, but also writing the arrangement.
Oh, absolutely.
Então, eu expliquei a ele que nós temos feito isso aqui, porque minha crença é de que a melhor forma de uma pessoa entender como funciona arranjo é fazendo arranjo.
And I will add one other thing that's really important is being able to hear real musicians play the music too. That's really important. I know it's hard to do right now with COVID, but it's really important.
É uma coisa que eu acho que é muito importante dizer, é muito importante vocês escutarem músicos de verdade tocando o arranjo.
So the other class I teach, I teach applied just private jazz composition lessons to our graduate students, but we also teach a seminar in jazz compositional styles for graduate students. And the whole point of that is to go back throughout jazz history and look at the different composers who have been important in jazz and how they differ from each other, and the techniques they use, the voices that they had, with the idea of informing our own writing.
E eu ensino também as aulas individuais no nível de mestrado para os nossos alunos de composição de jazz, e também tenho uma outra aula que é o seminário em composição de jazz e estilos do jazz, que lá basicamente nós analisamos e estudamos as obras de diferentes compositores e tentamos identificar as diferenças entre as vozes e características de cada um, o estilo, etc. So this kind of work is what I have been doing with the advanced level of this course. We have been understanding the history of jazz in the eyes of Brazilian musicians, but it's still the history of jazz. And we have been analyzing compositions and discussing the evolution of the style, but not with big band music, but mostly with small ensemble arrangements and compositions.
Sure.
Então eu expliquei a ele que no nível avançado é o que nós temos feito, mas para bandas pequenas.
That's terrific.
Okay. Let's move. Another question. I will ask you 1 or 2 more, and then I will give space to the students to ask you some questions, okay? I have to choose the best ones. Yeah, this one. We know that in the decades of the 70s and the 80s, especially during the 80s, there was a huge jazz fusion scene in the whole world. What happened to jazz after that? What is the moment we live right now? What is the aesthetics or music language that has been associated with jazz over the last 10, 20, or 30 years?
Interestingly enough, in the 80s, just that point in time when you're talking about a kind of a fusion of jazz, drawing a lot on kind of popular music trends and rock music trends and even some world music trends. Exactly that same time that was going on, there was also a reaction to that, led by like Wynton Marsalis and that group, where it was mostly about very traditional jazz and the value of that. It created there was a big fight that went on for maybe 10 years or so.
And Wynton won the fight, by the way.
No, I don't think so. I think what happened is, Wynton certainly established something great, but I think what's happened is it's gotten more diffuse. When you look at jazz artists today, it's actually hard to define. I mean, what direction we're going, because I think we're going in so many different directions. A lot of the music that we listen to as jazz is kind of hard to even necessarily say is jazz. It could be just as comfortable residing in contemporary classical music, or in folk music, or in world music of some sort, or in hip hop. So I think it has always been, right from the very beginning, moving outward and embracing more and more music. You saw that as early as Dizzy Gillespie, embracing Cuban music. And I think it's just continued to go that way. And I don't see anything stopping it from continuing to expand that way.
So you see jazz like a kind of reverse pyramid, like doing this.
Exactly. In terms of its embracing and drawing from other musics.
Ok, ele disse que é verdade que durante a década de 80 houve um grande sucesso do movimento Jazz Fusion e de formas mais populares de música mais comercial, mas ao mesmo tempo houve uma reação a isso, houve uma espécie de luta com músicos como Wynton Marsalis produzindo uma forma mais tradicional de jazz. E o que aconteceu e o que acontece, na verdade, em toda a história do jazz é um movimento de abertura, um movimento de expansão, um movimento de se tomar diferentes direções e de ampliação dos horizontes. Por isso que no final eu fiz essa comparação com a pirâmide invertida, porque é como se nós estivéssemos partindo disso indo para diversas direções. Então, o Chuck enxerga o jazz de hoje como algo tão amplo que chega num ponto que você não consegue dizer mais claramente o que é jazz, o que não é jazz, quando é world music, quando é hip hop, por exemplo. Okay, I will ask you one more, and then I will let the students ask you some questions before we end, okay? Yeah, I have to ask you that one. I would like you to say a brief phrase regarding some musicians that have been associated with large ensembles and some musicians that have been associated with small ensembles. Gostaria que você falasse rapidamente sobre músicos que foram associados com formações maiores e menores. Are you ready?
You're going to give me names of people?
Yes, and I just would like you to say a brief phrase about the music of this person.
Okay.
And some of them have been associated mostly with big band music or large ensemble writing, and some of them mostly small ensemble.
Okay.
Eu vou falar os nomes de alguns músicos associados a formações musicais maiores e menores e pedir para ele falar a opinião dele. George Gershwin.
Wonderful composer from the standpoint of introducing Americana to the classical music world, not necessarily a jazz composer.
Excelente compositor no ponto de vista de colocar o folclore americano dentro da música erudita, não necessariamente um compositor de jazz. Leonard Bernstein.
Very similar in that respect. Incredible conductor. Bernstein's interests were so widespread that he embraced all sorts of music, and I think it really had great influence on the American audience in listening to different types of music. Again, not a jazz composer, but he loved jazz itself.
Ele disse que ele é uma pessoa que fez muitas coisas, é um excelente regente, mas também compositor, e que uma das grandes importâncias, parecido com o feedback que ele deu do George Gershwin, mas disse que uma das coisas importantes é fazer com que as pessoas nos Estados Unidos ouvissem a vários gêneros musicais por conta dele, mas não é necessariamente um compositor de jazz. Pessoal, vocês podem ir preparando as perguntas que vocês têm também, para a gente já não passar do tempo, tá? Podem ir digitando enquanto isso. Duke Ellington.
Oh, the quintessential jazz composer, the person who basically defined, especially for big bands, you know, what jazz could be like in a big band. He is very individual in his approach. Nobody sounds like Duke Ellington, and what the cool thing he embraced was the ability to draw out the individual voices and to give space for the individual voices of his musicians inside a large big band. And that's still the model for today for that.
I knew we were going to have a long answer for this one, but that's okay. Ele disse que é o compositor de jazz essencial, que ele foi o cara que definiu como seria o som da Big Band, e que dentro do formato da Big Band, que ele deu voz a cada um dos músicos, que ele foi um cara que soube explorar a sonoridade e a voz de cada um dos músicos individualmente. Quincy Jones.
Quincy started out as a jazz composer, great jazz composer, but became probably better known as a producer because his vision was so broad in terms of what music had to offer.
Ele era essencialmente um compositor de jazz, mas acabou se tornando um produtor. A visão dele musical era muito longa, o que ele tem a oferecer é muito amplo. Mariah Schneider.
Maria is a wonderful composer that has really opened the door for the big band to be treated as a contemporary, serious orchestra.
Uma compositora maravilhosa que abriu as portas para a Big Band ser tratada como uma importante orquestra séria. Lembrando que a palavra séria, ela pode ser traduzida também como típico da música erudita. Okay, the last five. Monk.
Monk is one of our greatest small group jazz composers. He's really almost like a songwriter, and his pieces are so distinctive and they're such wonderful miniatures. No one kind of compares.
Ele é um ótimo compositor. Suas peças são muito distintas. Ninguém se compara. Maravilhoso. Ornette Coleman.
Ornette Coleman opened the door to a different type of composition, one that was more conceptual, but also that really provided his musicians with a springboard to be themselves again.
Ótimo compositor, mais conceitual, mas permitiu aos seus músicos serem eles próprios. Hermeto Pascoal.
You know, Hermeto's music is, I don't know the complete body of work as much as I should, but it's incredibly diverse, and you guys know it better than I do. I don't think I should be telling you about Hermeto's music, but it's so unique. I mean, it's really hard to put a categorization on it, but that's what it's about, outrageous as well as beautiful and folk-like.
Ele disse que a música do Hermeto, ela é difícil de ser classificada, que ele não tem o conhecimento da obra inteira do Hermeto, mas ele conhece o suficiente, e disse que é muito único, que não soa como nada, que tem uma identidade própria. Pat Metheny and Lyle Mays.
Both wonderful composers, and that by virtue of their shared vision created just a tremendous group. I think it's been one of the models for contemporary small group writing, in addition to being just wonderful players. But the writing was really terrific. I knew Lyle at school. I was at University of North Texas at the same time with him. He was a genius back then, and sadly a genius that died way too young, but I think both of them drew on this whole idea of the American folk tradition, and they've been very influential for my own writing.
Eles são compositores maravilhosos que ajudaram a definir o estilo do jazz contemporâneo. Eu conheci o Lyle na universidade, ele já era um gênio, então, infelizmente é um gênio que foi embora muito cedo. E eles dois também são ótimos instrumentistas, influenciaram muito a minha visão artística. The last one, the Yellow Jackets.
You know what? I haven't listened to the Yellow Jackets in a long time now. I listened to a lot when their earlier albums. But of the bands in that genre, especially after Bob Mintzer joined them, I think they really kind of elevated that music to what was at times maybe a little bit initially very kind of pop oriented into something that's really thoughtful, writing wise, adventurous, and yet still coming out of that kind of jazz rock / fusion tradition.
Ele disse que faz tempo que ele não escuta o Yellow Jackets, ele escutava mais os primeiros álbuns, mas que especialmente desde a época que o Bob Mintzer entrou, que a banda adquiriu uma identidade sonora mais profunda. It's a very big coincidence because yes, Russell has just joined us. Hello, Russell. How are you doing? Cool. Your mic's turned off, but I'm finishing my interview with Chuck. I guess in no more than 5 minutes we'll be done. But you can stay with us. Eu queria saber se os estudantes têm mais alguma pergunta para o Chuck. Eu recebi uma pergunta. I have a question for you from one of the students about what's your opinion about the music of Mike Stern?
Oh, well, Mike actually played on one of my albums, although we had to record it remotely. And he's been down to the university a time or two too. So I love his music. He's extremely chromatic in his approach. The first time I heard him, it was just eye-opening almost in that regard. But I love that fact, and incredible energy. It's kind of an aggressive style of playing, which again I think can be very attractive.
O Mike, na verdade, tocou num dos meus álbuns. Eu acho que ele tem um estilo muito cromático que no começo me surpreendeu. Tem um estilo de tocar muito agressivo que eu acho muito atraente. I will do 2 more questions, okay? I will ask you 2 more questions. One is, Amanda asked, what is your opinion about a composer? What do you think that a composer needs to do to improve in each composition he creates?
I think, again, I'll go back to an answer I gave earlier, is first off, hear it. Get people to play it. So one of the biggest things you're going to do to improve is to hear it, because you take in your own reaction to it and make note of that. I mean, definitely get it recorded so you can listen again and again, but you will learn from that. Go ahead, make a few revisions. What I always recommend is do 1 revision pass and no more than 1. After that, you're kind of done. You should move on to writing a new piece. But I guarantee you, having heard that, even if you don't ever get that first piece exactly where you want it, the revision isn't quite there, it will impact your very next piece, and that will be improved. So the growth process, write, listen, write some more.
Ele disse que o ponto mais importante é você ter outros músicos para tocar a música que você está fazendo, e você fazer uma revisão, mas apenas uma vez. E no final ele descreveu que o processo é escrever, escutar e escrever mais. Luiz, eu vou precisar fazer só uma pergunta. É a sua. Ok, the last question. Wait, I'm trying to translate that. What do you consider to be the most advanced level of harmony studies, and what do you suggest? Do you suggest any books for advanced harmonic studies? Actually, I have one suggestion. I will type it here.
Good, I'm glad you do. I'm assuming the person's talking about jazz harmony too, right?
Yes, jazz harmony.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I don't use any books in my teaching for that. I work with people on that a lot, on how to expand their harmonic kind of overview and worldview. And so I have some techniques I like to introduce to them to make them explore. Honestly, a lot of it's an exploration process. It's really important to have a firm grounding in functional harmony. But from that point on, I think a lot of it is true individual exploration. So I don't use a book, and I'm not sure I would know. Maybe Russell know. I don't know what to suggest.
Eu não uso um livro. Eu acho que é muito importante você ter uma base em harmonia funcional e, a partir disso, pesquisa e experimentação. Não sei que livro exatamente eu poderia sugerir. Talvez o Russell saiba. Okay. Chuck, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah,
I had a lot of fun.
And thank you all for... Good to see you.
You're welcome. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Hello, Russell. Can you turn your mic